Welcome to the Converge21 podcast preview series. What is Converge21? Converge is a community of forward-looking ethics and compliance practitioners and leaders, and Converge21 is where we gather and connect. You're invited to groundbreaking keynotes, fireside chats with CECOs from the world's most impactful companies, and practical workshops that will empower you to move the needle within your organization. The goal of Converge21 is to explore emerging trends, topics, and tools that enable you to manage better ethics and compliance and drive value and impact to your overall company strategy. You will leave this conference with new resources, best practices, and actionable ideas that can put you and your compliance practice at the next level. Most importantly will be the engagement. You'll have the opportunity to engage virtually with compliance practitioners literally across the globe. This is one of the top compliance events annually, and Converge20 was a great success. I hope you will join me in attending Converge21. We'll link to the registration and information in the show notes to this podcast. In this episode, I visit with Michael Randrup, and we discuss his presentation at Converge21, The Devil in the Details, about the EU Whistleblower Directive and what it means for companies and compliance professionals. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and today I have with me Michael Randrup. He's Senior Compliance Specialist and Attorney at Ørsted. Michael, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Well, thank you for taking time for this interesting topic.
So, Michael, I was wondering if you could tell our audience what your current position and your role is at the company.
Yes, certainly. I am the only lawyer in the internal audit function of Ørsted, who is a global provider of onshore, offshore wind. So we build wind farms around the world. And have a goal of reaching zero emission for the world. And at this stage, we're 95% emission free as a company. Now, what I do in my function is that apart from audits on governance, risk, and compliance, and taking care of our own internal insurance company, I also manage the whistleblower hotline on a global basis.
Michael, your presentation has perhaps the most interesting title of any of the presentations at Converge21 as yet, and it is The Devil in the Details, EU Directive Requirements You May Not Know. I was wondering if you could tell us or give us a little preview of your remarks at Converge21.
Yes, absolutely. One of the new things out is the EU Directive on whistleblower. And even though we welcome the new directive, and also the entire change in the attitude towards whistleblowers. As I wrote, the devil really is in the detail, because what you cannot read in the directive is the interpretation laid out by the expert group in the Commission. And that detail is rather important for larger companies with more than 250 employees, because it's the attitude of the EU Commission that each single company, may that be a multinational company, if you have a subsidiary with above 250 employees, that subsidiary needs to have its own independent whistleblower hotline, not linked to the global setup that you have, but an independent hotline. So if you, as we have 4 different companies at our main location. Everyone in the company assumes that they're employed by Ørsted, but in fact they may be employed by a different company within the group. But we cannot have one single whistleblower hotline. We need to have 4. That's kind of a devil in the detail.
Michael, does that require individual training for each of those business units or subsidiaries in addition to the overall corporate training you might provide for the hotline? Will that put an additional training obligation on you?
It requires that we have people, four different set of people to answer a hotline.
So how does the protections provided by the EU directive, or how do you see that playing out on a global basis? So for instance, in the United States, there's typically not an affirmative requirement that companies demonstrate there's no retaliation. How are you thinking through, if I could ask you to put your lawyer hat on, from a legal perspective, putting some of these EU type obligations on jurisdictions that may not have them?
Sure. Now it's my belief, but I may be incorrect. But I believe that this is EU legislation. It's likely going to be individual from EU country to EU country because it's a directive that needs to be implemented. I would say that those requirements are governing the EU countries, and an EU country with subsidiaries in the US would perhaps not be subject to those rules and can follow American standards.
So for any multinational company, meaning with business units or subsidiaries across the world, is this going to put the whistleblower or reporting system more in a silo so that you, perhaps sitting in the corporate office, or a compliance officer sitting in the home office in one jurisdiction, might not have visibility across these individual business units under the EU directive?
Yes, that's certainly our concern. We don't see the greater picture in what the EU is requiring us to do in this, because I certainly think that we are losing the global oversight, and that's likely to be conflicting with the FCPA and the SEC guidelines on how you do oversight on a global basis. It's going to create that interesting situation. Would you rather be non-compliant with the EU guidelines than with the FCPA rules? So that's an interesting question.
Well, I hope it doesn't lead to the question of who are you more afraid of, the Department of Justice or an EU regulator. But you've also indicated that you and others are trying to publicize and perhaps move towards some sort of global exemption or exception, which would allow a more global approach. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. We've had the good assistance from the Danish Ministry of Justice that can certainly see that this doesn't make sense. On the other hand, we do have an obligation towards the EU. We're an EU member, and this is a EU directive. Currently, we have received an exemption from the Ministry of Justice on that restriction not to implement a global hotline. And I should say that the EU is responding back that if the whistleblower agrees to it and gives his consent, you can certainly use a global whistleblower hotline. But we need to cater for the event that if we have someone, say in Germany or in Poland, who decides that no, I want to solely report to a local hotline, that we need to be ready and have a setup that works in that jurisdiction. And it also works for American companies working into Europe. So the same goes for those companies. They will be subject to the EU rules and guidelines since they're operating in an EU country with a subsidiary.
Will the subsidiary hotline, can the subsidiary hotline be across multiple legal jurisdictions? So you mentioned France, Germany, Poland, you're in Switzerland. Will there be a requirement for individual hotlines in those countries, or can there be a business unit or subsidiary hotline across multiple countries?
No, not across multiple countries. It's not just a country issue. It's also a subsidiary issue. If you have, as a group, if you have 4 subsidiaries in Germany above 250 employees, each of those subsidiaries will need to have their own independent whistleblower hotline. I know that may sound totally awkward, And it is.
Wow. So you and I are having this conversation, and we hope to have this conversation with other compliance professionals. I'm pretty sure you're having internal conversations within your organization on how to do this. But let me focus on the greater compliance community. Are you having those conversations with your colleagues literally across Europe as about how to deal with the situation?
Absolutely. And we're trying to activate everyone to raise their voice and saying that directive does not make sense. But at this stage, we have been trying to go to the expert group in the EU Commission and putting forward our requests. We've had the good support of a number of our German colleagues, Swedish colleagues, Finnish colleagues, Spanish colleagues, large companies, Philips, Siemens, Volkswagen, and all of the major multinational Danish companies. I realize we're a small country, but the industry associations, Business Europe, the maritime organizations, and so on, they're all on our side. But the EU is rather stubborn in this, so we need all the help and assistance that we can get on putting a pressure on the local governments. But as I said, you can't read it out of the directive. You can only read it from the interpretation that the EU expert group is putting upon this. So hopefully what's going to happen is that a lot of EU countries are implementing the directive on the face of the directive, which doesn't have those limitations in it. And if that happens, then I have the word from the Ministry of Justice in Denmark that will certainly upkeep our exemption. Maybe it's just because the Danish, the Swedish, and the Finnish Ministry of Justice are really following the book and are being the good guys, or maybe the two good guys, and implementing the directive as instructed from Brussels. Hopefully, some of the other countries are just closing their eyes and saying, no, we'll take the directive on the face of what it looks like, because you can't read it, as I said, in the directive. But we have it in print from the expert group in the EU.
Michael, I started this podcast by commenting on the title of your presentation, and I thought it was perhaps most eye-catching after listening to you. Actually, I think it may be the most descriptive description, the devil in the details. Unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you, what do you hope to get out of Converge21?
I hope to get some international attention to some unfortunate EU rules and a pressure from the international compliance community that the directive needs to be changed to something operational. Not just this is not a cost perspective. This is if I look on the protection for the individual whistleblower. I mean, if you were to go to if you sit in a smaller subsidiary and are forced to go to that subsidiary instead of going to a corporate head office and have some lights on the operation in a subsidiary, it's not the best protection that you're giving to a whistleblower. So I hope that we can uphold the global oversight and the better protection for the whistleblower. Also, simply because I don't think that we can train so many staffs around the world to handle a whistleblower case which may not come, or that there's hopefully you see once every twice a year. But from a global compliance setup, I mean, from a head office, we have much better control of what's happening and the tools that we can implement and assist the whistleblowers with. So that's what I'm hoping. That's the attention.
Well, Michael, unfortunately, we now are at the end of our time, and I am greatly looking forward to your presentation. I want to learn more about the devil in the details of the EU directive, but also hope to be able to engage other compliance professionals as you have with your colleagues So I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation and engaging with you at Converge. And thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you will join me at Converge21. We're going to link to the information and registration page in the show notes. It's going to be a great conference, literally one of the best annually going forward.